Thank you again, Dr. Porras. Dr. Porras is our president of the International Society of Neutron Capture Therapy. He is also the professor and researcher in atomic, molecular, and nuclear physics at the University of Granada. He is also the director of the University Chair Neutrons for Medicine in Granada University. He's also the leader of the project Nemesis towards a facility for clinical BNCT and radioisotope production at the University Hospital Virgen de las Nieves in Granada. He has several awards, so it is an honor for us to hear you and thank you for sharing this presentation. Please, Ignacio.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for your kind introduction. And I also want to thank the Communication Task Force of the International Society for this invitation, which is really a pleasure for me, and also for all the work that you are doing in disseminating BNCT throughout the world. So I'm really glad to be here, and I will share my screen. Okay. I guess you see it?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the title of this talk is Perspective in Boron Neutron Capture Therapy, and I call this Accelerating a New Hope in the Fight of Cancer, because this is a playing with the words, because we expect that there is going to be a rapid increase in the expansion of BNCT with the new facilities which are based on particle accelerators, and this can be constructed in hospitals. This new era for BNCT will allow much more clinical trials and to be accepted as an alternative therapy for some of the most difficult type of cancers. So this is the outline of my talk, and probably there will be people from the audience who are not in the BNCT field, so I will give a brief introduction to the principles of BNCT. Then I will also review a little bit of history and some clinical results of the clinical trials that were done in research reactors. But then I will step on the new projects, and some of them already performing clinical trials with accelerator-based neutron sources. Then I will talk a little bit about our project in Granada University and the University Hospital. And also I will discuss briefly some of the many open problems that can lead to improvements to this therapy and to expand to other cancers. Finally, I will just briefly present our society for those who may not be aware of that, and very schematic conclusions of the talk. So I will proceed with a brief introduction to BNCT. Well, the principles of BNCT are based on trying to hit tumor cells with the most effective type of particles. The different kind of radiation can produce different damage for the same dose. And for example, here in the plot in the left, it is compare different type of radiations and the damage that they produce in terms of the survival. The survival is drastically reduced in case, for example, of alpha particles of a few MeV, because it's not only depend on the type of particle, but also in the energy. So alpha particles and also light ions of a few MeV can produce double strand breaks, which are much more difficult to repair. And that's the reason why these are more effective. The problem is that these particles at that energy range has very little penetration. So they can just have a range of microns. So it's very difficult to hit tumors with these particles. But the idea of BNCT is to produce them inside the tumor cells. How we can produce these alpha particles in the tumor cells? Well, using neutrons and making them react with certain isotopes. And in this reaction, it is produced an alpha particles and a recoil nuclei. And the most effective for this, because the highest cross section for this for the neutron capture reaction, one of them is boron-10. Boron-10 is a stable isotope present in nature, in natural boron, and if it can be introduced in the tumor cells, the neutrons, which have no electric charge, can penetrate the body, but they can react with this boron, producing these very effective tumor cells. And we can see here in the plot that the probability of producing this reaction, of being captured by boron, is higher than any other element present in the tissue when the neutrons have low energy. The lowest energy that the neutron can have is called the thermal energy, when they are in a thermal equilibrium with the medium. For BNCT, it has to be used a slightly higher energies, like called epithermal, because these allow the neutron to have more penetration in the tissue, then lose energy and becomes thermal when it's more likely to be captured by boron. So this is a binary therapy, which needs two agents that by themselves are very few toxic, but when they mix together, they produce a therapeutic effect. One of them is neutrons. I mentioned the epithermal neutrons. We need a beam of neutrons. And also, it's key, a boron compound, which is uptaken selectively by the tumor cells. And then the most recent clinical trial, the most used is BPA, it's a boronated amino acid. And this therapy has the good features of both external radiotherapy and radioisotope therapy, in the sense that external radiotherapy does not affect the tissues which are not under the radiation field, but it's not selective in the sense of what you hit, you damage. But in this case, we also have the good feature of radioisotope therapy, when the radiation is more directed to where the compound is located. And in radioisotope therapy, the problem is that the compound, which has a radioisotope nuclei, can be absorbed in different organs. In the case of BNCT, if it circulates through the body, if it's accumulated in an organ which is not on the neutron field, they will not produce any damage. So this is what I think the interesting features of BNCT. So this is how this works. Patients receive an infusion of the boron compound, and the boron circulates and is retained in the tumor. And it's observed empirically that there is a time window in which the concentration in the tumors is much higher than in the blood and in normal tissue. Then, during this window, the neutron irradiation is performed according usually to Monte Carlo dose plans. And then, when the boron captures the neutron, they produce these particles which have a shorter range than the cell size. The alpha particles travels around 9 microns, and the recoil nucleus less than that. Then this is very interesting for diffuse tumor, which can be treated precisely with other forms of radiotherapy. And the reason is that the depth dose curves are different for the tumor cells than for the normal tissue ones. And that's really an advantage. Well, the first idea is very old, came from a paper by Gordon Locher in '36, when he, hypothesized that if we could deliver boron selectively to tumor cells, then this could be a therapeutic effect when irradiated with neutrons. But we have to wait until the 50s to start the first clinical trials that were done at Brookhaven Graphite Research Reactors on February 15 of 1951 by William Sweet, which is a neurosurgeon, was a neurosurgeon at the Massachusetts General Hospital, and performed clinical trials for patients with recurrent glioblastoma multiforme after surgery and conventional radiation. And this motivated also the construction of a new reactor with a greater flux, trying to improve the results, which was the Brookhaven Medical Research Reactors. However, the results were rather disappointing, and no clear increase of survival times, so the trials were stopped in 61. But here are some images of this. It was a challenging trials because they have to introduce patient in a thermal column of the reactor. It was very complicated. And also the neutron beam was not too clean. They have some gamma contamination, but above all, the boron compounds were not very selective. But this motivated the clinical trials moved to Japan because Professor Hiroshi Hatanaka was a visiting researcher during the United States clinical trials, and he started a BNCT program in Japan. And one advance was the use of BSH, this compound that you can see here, that cannot travel the blood-brain barrier of the healthy brain, but could enter the damaged vessels of the vicinity of the tumor. So this is the first clinical trial that showed an increased survival, and this is a plot on different groups, especially for those patients for which the tumor was not very profound, where the tumor's depth was less than 6 centimeters. This motivated what is called modern BNCT, which we can start them from the 80s or 90s, when many phase 2 clinical trials started with epithermal neutron beams, because one of the problems of the former trials was that the neutrons were thermal and they needed to remove the skull of the patient for treating the brain tumors. But now with this epithermal neutron beam, that was not required. And also a new compound was introduced by Mishima, which is the BPA, the boronated amino acid that I mentioned before. And they were applied in different clinical trials, Japan, Finland, Sweden, and other countries, for brain tumors, head and neck local recurrent cancers, and melanoma. Also, there were very interesting clinical trials in Pavia for metastasis of colon cancers in the liver, and they irradiated the liver of the patient and implanted again. So this is a compilation that I found in the literature from the clinical trials that were done at research reactors. And the only one which is still doing clinical trials or compassionate treatments is the one in Taiwan, the Thor Research Reactor. Most of these reactors are or close to decommissioning or no longer doing clinical trials. But they have, here I'm going to show some of the results of these clinical trials, some examples. For example, from Helsinki, complete remission of glioblastoma multiforme after BNCT. Also, for head and neck cancer, there have been very, very impressive results. And this is from Japan. And here is a Kaplan-Meier plots of the survival after BNCT for newly diagnosed glioblastoma multiforme in clinical trials in Osaka, Kyoto. Also in Tsukuba, in the reactor GRR, where they were observed an increased survival with BNCT compared with conventional radiotherapy. But for head and neck cancer, the results have been even better. This is the result of Professor Kato in Osaka for the survival, increased survival for head and neck cancer with recurrent head and neck cancers, which is very difficult to treat with other therapies. These were also done in Helsinki, head and neck recurrent cancers with increased survivals. And this motivated, well, also this is from Taiwan, treatment of brain tumors in Taiwan, which is still doing clinical trials there. And this is like a compilation which was published in the report Nuclear Physics for Medicine, in the NUPEC report, for glioblastoma and recurrent head neck cancer. And this suggests that BNCT is a real hope for this type of cancer, which are very difficult to treat with other therapies. Then, before stepping towards the accelerator-based neutron source, I want to briefly discuss a little bit of physics about the dose delivered by BNCT. Well, the dosimetry of BNCT is complex because there are different dose contributions. When epithermal neutrons enter the body, they are most likely interacting with hydrogen in the tissues by elastic collisions, and they produce recoil protons that deliver some dose also in normal tissues. This is important and has to be considered is what is called fast dose. And this critically depends on the energy of the incoming neutrons, because the neutrons deliver half of the energy in average to the proton when colliding elastically with it. Then when the neutrons are thermalized, then become other processes dominant. For example, the capture by nitrogen, which produce a proton of 585 keV. This is called thermal dose, this component. They can be also captured by hydrogen, and this produce a gamma of 2.2 MeV, which has to be considered. And these three contributions can happen both at tumor and at normal tissues, more or less at the same level. But then there is the selective component, which is the boron capture, that if boron is absorbed higher in the tumor cells, they will be the most dominant dose component and produce the total dose when sum to all the other. But this dose may have a different biological effect because of the secondary particles that are produced by the neutrons have different lead for them. And they are weighted with some RBE, radiation biological effectiveness factors, relative, which weights the different dose components in order to compare with the dose that will be required with conventional radiotherapy for the same effect. There are some uncertainties of this that with this procedure that will be discussed later. But it's important that that this makes much more different the dose on the tumor than in normal tissue when including those factors, because the boron dose has a higher lead LET and a higher RBE. Here is an example of for 2 keV neutrons. This is from simulation in tumor and normal tissue, how the difference can be up to a few centimeters depth for an example of a given concentration of boron in tumors and normal tissue, which is normally there is a 3.5 more boron in tumor than in normal tissues. Also, this can allow us to analyze which is the optimal neutron energy for BNCT, because of course you cannot produce monoenergetic neutrons. This is not possible, but you can produce different spectrum that will lie in a range where the neutrons are optimal. Well, the neutrons optimal are from thermal to, let's say, 10 or 20 keV. This is the region where the neutrons are useful because they can produce higher dose at the tumor than the maximum dose delivered to the normal tissues. But beyond 100 keV, then the dose produced in normal tissue increase rapidly, and then it can exceed the dose of the on the tumor. So this should be avoided as much as possible in the neutron beam, neutrons above 100 keV. And we found that the optimal of these energies are around 2 or 3 keV in that range. The range, epithermal range, is considered up to 10 keV. Well, now I'm going to present the accelerator-based neutron source. This is a major advance for BNCT because this can be produced with compact particle accelerator that can be located in hospitals, as a difference to research reactors which are outside. And these are some of the neutron-producing reactions. A particle accelerator accelerate protons or deuterons, and by collision of them with suitable targets like lithium or beryllium, they can produce neutrons, and the yield depends on the incident particle energy, but also the just neutron spectrum that can be found can be of higher or less energy, depending on the energy of the incident particle. So these are the reactions that are being considered. The most popular are proton on lithium and proton on beryllium, because in that cases, the maximum neutron energy are less than with other neutron producing reaction like the DT reactions or deuterons on lithium. So what are the elements of an accelerator-based neutron source? Well, we need the particle accelerator. This is an example of the radio frequency quadrupole of the University of Tsukuba. You need a neutron-producing target, and then in any case, neutron has to be partially moderated in order to reach the epithermal range. And there is a key element in these facilities, which is the beam shaping assembly, in which neutrons are moderated with a material such as magnesium fluoride. Also, you need reflectors, usually of lead or bismuth, to reflect neutrons that travels outside the moderator. And also, of course, a collimator to define a well-defined neutron field on the patient. And this can change the spectrum with respect to research reactor. This is the case of Kyoto. The reactor Curie in epithermal mode is shown in blue, and the neutron spectrum from the cyclotron C-bands, which is used in an accelerator-based neutron source that I'm going to explain, has a more epithermal neutrons. And there are many projects in construction or already constructed or conceived in different parts of the world. And this is very promising because the number of projects is larger than the number of facilities, which are in red, the reactor used for BNCT in the past. Here is a list. This isn't growing because I have been known that in China there are more projects than those mentioned here, but this is increasing, and these are very good news for this. Well, the first facility which was based on accelerator was the C-bands in Kyoto from Sumitomo Heavy Industries, and they use a cyclotron of 30 MeV and 1 milliampere of current. And then this system has been installed in 2 hospitals. One of them is the Kansai BNCT Medical Center, and it has been approved by the Japanese National Health Insurance System for the treatment of recurrent head and neck cancers, which is great news for BNCT. Here in Europe, we have a facility completed in Helsinki, which is going to start clinical trials this year, which is in the Helsinki University Hospital, Neutron Therapeutics. Also, a facility which is currently doing clinical trials is the new Boron Neopec system in Xiamen Humanity Hospitals. And also is start recruiting patients for clinical trials in Korea in this facility of Daewon Medax, which is based on an Earth-Q accelerator with 3 different neutron beams. So this is good news for the field. Our project is just in the first phase, which is the conceptual design, but they have got the interest of the health authorities, and it is in the road of public procurement, innovative public procurement. And this is called Nemesis because it also is aimed for other applications, neutron for medicine and science. I will speak about the BNCT application. We have a site which was a former hospital here in the city center. You can see the bullfighting ring here. And it is based on that we have 2 bunkers from conventional radiotherapy that can be adapted for the therapy. We can start an electrostatic accelerator as the same as in Finland for Neutron Therapeutics. And we will produce targets for radioisotope production and also a beam shaping assembly for BNCT. And the beam shaping assembly based on a different concept of our group, is to produce the neutrons with a smaller energy from the protons, 2.1 MeV as a difference with most of the options. And this produce neutrons that with adequate beam shaping assembly, we can produce a spectrum which has a shorter tail than most of the spectrum in other facilities. And for example, we can see here that our spectrum, which is the black line, drops completely in log scale from 200 keV. So the fast neutron tail is strongly reduced, and we think this can be very good for the treatments. Why? Because currently in BNCT, all fast neutrons has the same biological, are assigned the same biological effectiveness factor, but the biological effectiveness can be different depending on the neutron energy because of the LET. It is well known there are some curves that I show here in the plot on the right of different biological endpoints as a function of the LET, of the linear energy transfer. One of them is the irreparable lethal damage or the single track lethal damage, which are the most interesting for determining the biological effectiveness of therapies. And we can see how it rapidly increase with the LET in the region when the neutrons go beyond 20 keV to hundreds of keV. So avoiding these neutrons could provide a beam that could reduce damage to normal tissues. And this is not currently taking into account in the factors, but could be in the therapeutic outcome. And this is the shorter neutron energy spectrum that meets all the recommendation from the International Atomic Energy Agency for there are different figures of merits. The flux, epithermal flux, the contribution for thermal neutron is less than 5%. The divergence is good, beyond 0.7, sorry. And the fast neutron component is reduced beyond below the limits. But we have also to consider that most of this fast dose is due to neutrons which are between 10 keV and 20 keV, which are still useful for the therapy. So if we just include those beyond 20 keV, it will be half of the fast dose. And also the gamma dose is very small. And we have performed simulation on real patients from glioblastoma. This is a difficult case to be treated with conventional radiotherapy. This is a huge tumor that also is located close to the chiasma. And in the right side of the slide, the top plot is the dose volume histogram with BNCT with Nemesis, and the lower plot is the treatment plan with the conventional radiotherapy. So we can see how the chiasma, which is will be compromised because it will receive dose, is inevitable in conventional radiotherapy, but would be beyond the limits in BNCT. Also here is a second patient that we have studied, and we are studying also more to see the possibilities of this neutron source. Also, in terms of radiation protection, avoiding neutrons in the 100 of keV range is important because can reduce the risk of radio-induced cancers. And now I would like to talk a little bit about some open research problems, current trends, and research studies that can improve BNCT and also expand. One of them is the reduction of uncertainties. There are some uncertainties in the dose delivered also to the tumor and to normal tissues. And there are some source of uncertainty. And one of them is the physical dose. We rely on Monte Carlo simulations, so we need good nuclear data, cross-section data to be reliable. A major one is the biological weighted dose. And also there are some uncertainty in the boron concentration in the tumor and organ as risk. But also there are very, very important research problem, which is the search of new boron compounds that can be more effective than BPA, which in terms of nanoparticle could lead a much higher boron content to the tumor cells. Also, the study of the immunoeffects of BNCT is very important. And finally, the expansion of BNCT to other tumors. With respect to the uncertainties, I want to mention that there are some, well, it is well known the role of nitrogen, for example, in the body, but there are other isotopes as chlorine, which are present in, for example, in brain and in the skin, and also contribute to the dose in normal tissues in the absence of boron. And for example, we have measured the cross-section of the neutron capture on nitrogen and also on chlorine, but the one in chlorine is under analysis. And this can be done at CERN in the neutron time of flight facility called NTOF. With different detectors, we have measured the cross-section of the nitrogen, and we have observed, like we can see here, that is slightly less than the evaluations, especially from the GND database. It's like a 6% less the thermal cross-section. Also, we have measured the first resonance of this reaction. A second source of uncertainty, which is even higher than this, is the biological effectiveness dose, what is called the weighted dose in BNCT, in order to compare with conventional radiotherapy. Well, there's a new concept that has been introduced by Gonzalez and Santa Cruz, which is the photon isoeffective dose, which is more accurate than the current approach. We have also proposed a first-order approximation to this concept, which needs less data, because all this concept needs radiobiological data. So it is important also to perform radiobiological measurements with neutrons for obtaining the alpha and beta parameters that these approaches, these methods require. And we have performed these radiobiological measurements at the Institut Loewe-Langevin in Grenoble, France, when we have installed a radiobiological lab near the neutron lines in the same experimental hall. This is a reactor used for research, and we use a neutron line, which is a very pure thermal neutron. Well, they are cold neutrons, but they're equivalent to thermal. And these cold neutrons can travel through a bent guide, and the fast neutrons and gammas cannot cross that. But the cold neutrons are reflected because the large wavelength of the de Broglie wave, and we can experiment with very clean, pure neutron beam. And here is a picture of where we put the cells in quartz cuvettes that you can see here with the culture medium, and we introduce them in the neutron line. And this allows us to make clonogenicity assays under irradiation with different doses. Also, this can be used for testing new boron compounds, because we can do it with a very clean beam, and we can measure the CBE of a given boron compound. Also, we have analyzed the statistical distribution in cells of the boron content, because it could be non-uniform. And we have observed that with a single cell ICP MS at the University of Zaragoza. And we have observed the statistical distribution of the boron content. This is a very sensitive instrument that can measure accurately femtograms in cells, 10 to the minus 15 grams in cells. Also, a major advance for this therapy may come from the dosimetry in real time, because as the boron distribution in the tumor and in organ at risk is key for the effect of the therapy, it could be measured in real time with a Compton camera, for example, or a SPECT. This detects the prompt gamma that are emitted in the neutron-boron reaction. And here is a test of a Compton camera where we are working with the group of the Institute of Física Corpuscular of the University of Valencia. And we are testing with these are cells treated with BPA. And we can see the content of BPA. We can make an image and quantify it. But of course, the boron carrier is a major goal for improvement of BNCT. And there are different groups in the world. We are collaborating also with a group of the University of the Institute of Material Science of Barcelona for finding new boron compounds. And for example, a boron nanoparticle could load a much higher load of boron into the tumor cells, and they can selectively be attached by the tumor cells either by passive targeting or active targeting. The passive targeting is based on the particles in the tens of nanometers can travel the unstructured tumor blood vessels, but not the normal tissue ones, which are more structured. And also there's the possibility of targeting them or functionalizing with some antibodies or peptides that can be recognized by specific receptors. A very interesting field of research, and this is a work from the group of Argentina, is the pro-immunogenic effect that BNCT may have. All forms of radiotherapy can stimulate immune cells, but most of the radiotherapies has also anti-immunogenic effect because they can destroy circulating lymphocytes. In case of BNCT, as is a selective therapy, we can expect that the pro-immunogenic effects can be more important than the anti-immunogenic ones. And here is a result of an experiment with rats that one of the rats had tumor in the two legs, but only one of them was irradiated. The BNCT responding animals, which is the solid line, black line, of course, the tumor was reduced by BNCT, but also the other leg which has not been irradiated. And this did not happen for the non-responding to BNCT. So this is a very, very interesting result. So the exploring the combined effect of immunotherapies and BNCT could be a very interesting field of research. Also, the application of new type of tumors I think it's very interesting because there are other tumors apart of glioblastoma and head and neck cancer that are difficult to treat with current therapy. For example, there are some pediatric cancers like DIPG, which is a diffuse tumor in children, and we have made preclinical studies for the possibility of applying BNCT. The cells of these pediatric tumor cells uptake boron similarly to a cell line of an adult head and neck cancer. And also we have made the first irradiations at ILL in Grenoble, and we have seen that the proliferation is strongly reduced with just an irradiation of a few minutes compared with without BPA the viability is much higher even with the irradiation of 75 minutes. So this is stimulate further research. Also, we have made simulation of mesothelioma, which is a cancer that has been studied by Japanese group and also in Pavia. And this seems to be feasible because they can be radiated with accelerator-based neutron source, and the heart and normal tissues in lungs and other surrounding organs can be spared. And the mesothelioma could receive a therapeutic dose. Also, we have made the first boron uptake study of triple-negative breast cancer and also compares to the head and neck adult cancers. So I think this stimulates possibly expanding BNCT for other tumors. Finally, I want to briefly introduce you to the International Society for Neutron Capture Therapy. I have the honor of having been elected president, and the spirit of this society is to promoting the development of BNCT, the collaboration between different groups, And this is a scientific non-profit society legally registered. And this society is based on the General Assembly, which all members is hold every biennial conference. There is a board of councillor which has elaborated the constitution and the modification to the constitution, an executive board of 12 members, and which contains also technical groups for the different disciplines involved on BNCT. And of course, the communication task force, which is present here. I want to mention that we are creating a new technical group, which is for patient transfer to the new facilities where clinical trials are accepting patients. Because we are in the society, we receive from patients and family of patients requests of possibilities of BNCT treatment. These are cancer which has very bad prognosis, and the targets of BNCT. So BNCT can be a real hope for them. So we will try to do our best to facilitate this transfer of patients. So finally, I will give this is my opinion, some conclusion, which is more personal opinion on BNCT. BNCT has been used as the last line of defense in radiation therapy because patients that has been subject to BNCT has received any other type of therapy. And this has shown that BNCT can be the only hope for certain type of tumors. And that everything that new had been tried, I mentioned the head and neck cancers, the liver metastases, has led to a success. So the therapeutic ability of BNCT has been proved. So maybe it's time to move that lifeline of defense forward. Of course, it is a strong work required, but it's very exciting because it requires multidisciplinary teams and resources. Of course, we have to keep in mind the uncertainty, but it's better than doing nothing, and we should work reducing them, and it is being done. So we also can benefit for continuous improvement from research and from other fields, like I mentioned, bio-nanotechnology can be translated to BNCT. And of course, you can count on our society for promoting collaboration and helping in your new projects. So there's also, I find, opportunities for new young researchers because there are many open research problems as we have mentioned here. And there will be opportunities in the new clinical facilities. And also I want to mention that the industry is getting involved in BNCT from the start. And there are new companies that are coming into BNCT, a growing number of them, where opportunities can be found. And also in the facility, we will need specialized staff for BNCT. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope this, I stand too long, sorry. I didn't check the time. I'm sorry for that.
It's fine. Thank you very much, Professor Porras, for this interesting talk. It's, I guess, it's a complete overview of what has happened in the BNCT society in the last years, and it's an interesting possibility to see what you are doing in Granada with your colleagues. So if anyone has any question, please raise your hand or write them in the chat, and I will try to give you space to ask. For example, for now, we have a question in the chat. It says, please, why we never took in consideration the reaction of elastic diffusion in presence of oxygen, also for the inelastic diffusion with oxygen?
Sorry, could you say that again? Elastic diffusion?
Yes.
Elastic scattering, you mean, or?
I guess, diffusion.
Yeah, okay. Okay, the neutron reaction or elastic in presence of oxygen. Okay, the elastic cross-section with oxygen is less important than in hydrogen, but it is considered in the simulation, of course, and also the inelastic one. The inelastic one can be more important if the neutrons have high energy in the MEV range. This is not present in most of the neutron beams, but they are taken into account. I just mentioned which are the most important components, but also the elastic collision with carbon is taken into account, and also in elements which are present in a small quantity, like potassium, sulfur, etc. I just mentioned those which are the most contributing to the dose.
Okay, we have another question from Stuart Green. It says, great talk, Ignacio. Have you published any of the work you mentioned on boron uptake in DIPG and triple negative breast cancer?
No, because we are going to irradiate that cell in a campaign that we are going to start in April. We just irradiated one sample of DIPG, and this sample, the clonogenicity couldn't be done because the sample was not okay. But we are going to do that in April. The boron uptake has not been published because we want to complete the study with the irradiation with neutrons for this, and we are going to publish soon. Yes, I think it's very interesting. Thank you.
Yes, he says thank you. Another question is if there are any facility that is using imaging during irradiation.
Yeah, I know that there are some, yes, they can. I don't know if they're using in the clinical trials, but I know that I have read works from different groups on both SPECT measurement and Compton cameras, and they can be using irradiation. I don't really know if they're using in real time, but they can be used. They can be developed. I have seen different prototypes of this.
Thank you. And if anyone else has a question, please, the floor is yours. Okay, we have one from Nikolaos Vulgaris. It says, thank you for the very informative and clear presentation. I would like to ask if there is available information or established guidelines regarding the radiation protection instrumentation, specifically for BNCT facilities with accelerators. For example, regarding portable workplace dose rate meters for the patient or staff during or after accelerator operation.
Okay, I think something of this can be found in the IAEA last, which is called Advances in BNCT from the IAEA. Here it is. There is a document published by the International Atomic Energy Agency. I think you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see.
Okay. In this document, there are some guidelines for radiation protection. And also, I have seen some articles in the literature, for example, for the group of Argentina, with in terms of the activation of the materials in accelerator-based neutron source. It's from Kreiner and Capoulat, I think, the paper. So you can search for that, yes.
Thank you very much. There's another question from Agustina Portu. Very nice talk, Ignacio. Thanks a lot. Could you comment on the sensibility of the online detection of boron you mentioned in culture cells, if I'm not wrong?
Yes. The sensitivity, we could measure micrograms in the sample. In a sample, a very, very small sample. So 1 microgram can be seen. With 1 microgram of boron, you can have enough gammas to distinguish from the background.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions? If we are okay, we don't have anything else to ask, I would thank you again, Professor Porras.